Nice to meet you. We met your wife Lillian. Yes, all right.
We're Napa.
Napa. Well, we're on our way to my dad's.
We're taking the long way to Texas.
RV, so we'll just take a nice scenic ride.
No.
But it's pretty and fun. We're doing
Yeah, it's a fun way.
That's what she said. Tennessee. Yeah. Said you flew to Dallas, rented a car. And, yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's long.
We kind of did that in 2020 also. We went all the way to New York and down, to South Carolina because, our job was quite. So we're like, hey, we can do whatever we want. So we just drove all over the country. Thank you. If you see me on my computer, I'm not watching a game. We run our Zoom. We run our Zoom, and so, even when we're gone, we still run it for them. There's no...
Get out your papyrus.
Yes, we're going to put our papyrus in our scrolls. But I shouldn't want you to think over here going, yeah, go Cowboys! That's only 19. So I don't do this stuff.
Or maybe you can do it too. Yeah. Oh, well, that's probably.
Is that the second bell? Okay. Just checking to see on your toes, baby. You're on probation. Okay, looks like everyone's here.
Sounds fuzzy up there.
Okay. All right, we're ready now. Let's bow and have word of prayer. Our Holy Father, how great and how good you are. You're the only true and living God. You're the King of kings and the Lord of all lords. Our gratitude and our eternal debt is in your hand, Father, that you have given us life itself. You have blessed us with so much, so extraordinary, so profound is our blessings, that we can live and work in peace and in such prosperity. Our Father, we know this is from you and from your hand, but especially, Father, for your Son and the hope of life that we have through him, and for your wisdom to designate this day as your day, the day we come together in your name to worship you. We pray, our Father, our worship will be acceptable to you this morning. Help us, Father, to remove every care from our life, our minds, and the things that we're involved in, that we focus on your scripture, your word, that we may learn from it, may be able to be strengthened by and grow from its truth. Please watch over us as parents, that we will have the wisdom to raise our children to follow you. Be with us as husbands and wives. Give us the maturity, the understanding, and the patience to grow our marriage so that we may always walk with each other as we walk with you. Please forgive us when we fail you and we don't do these things. Bless us now, Father, as we enter this study. Pray you will bless us in the days to come. Through Christ we pray. Amen. All right. There, can you hear that? Wow. You know, when James is teaching another class, we're just lost all the time. I don't know if I can turn this up. I don't know if any of you fellows that work over there. Try to hold it real close so you can see it. I mean, hear it. Maybe, can you hear that a little bit better?
I can see it.
You can see it?
Yeah, I can hear it.
Okay, you see it now? All right, I can see it, so we're ready.
Okay.
Oh, boy. Okay, we're in Acts chapter 17. Wednesday night we had talked about the fact that Paul and Silas had made their way down to Thessalonica from Philippi. They had traveled through the valleys that we see here on the map, going through Apollonia, and then Amphipolis. Amphipolis and Apollonia were important way stations to and from Thessalonica. In the city itself, there's very little of the ancient city left, certainly compared to Philippi. There's just about all of Philippi has been preserved in one way or another. Just very small portions of Thessalonica remain because the modern city was just built on top of it. But what you're looking at here are some of the underground shops. In the background, the theater. In the middle ground, that would be the forum where everyone would come together. Here's a shot from down underneath going through. It was very ornate and beautiful underground of sorts. It was basically just a covered mall. That's what it was. And we just simply put this picture in here, the tower. It's called the White Tower from Thessalonica. And the reason why is that this is, in modern time, the most iconic figure of Thessalonica. If you went and looked online or checked out any books on it, it would have this. That was from the Byzantine era, and it really has no bearing on the first century or Paul. He would not have seen that. That would not have been there. The synagogue was somewhere in that immediate vicinity underground. They just built apartments on top of it. So there's no remnant left of what the synagogue would be. And the events with the people, when they had called out Paul and Silas, and they had been hidden by their brethren in the first part of this chapter, they went and laid their hands on Jason, whose house was against the synagogue, and they knew that Paul and Silas had been staying with Jason. So they drug him out, and in all likelihood, it happened at this area right here at the theater. They would drag him out there, and they were calling for Paul and Silas, who would slip away. The brethren will get them out of town. They've already been beaten once in Philippi, and there's a major threat here in Thessalonica. So they're going to get out of town is basically what they're going to do. And getting out of town from this map that you can see, it's not the best. But what they would do is they will leave here and they will come down the coast here to Berea. And the coast is not like California. We don't want to think, they got there in Oceanside and then they went up to Santa Ana. Their coast side coast. Their seashore coast was just in and out and in and out and in and out. It wasn't a long straight shore. There were lots of coves and lots of places to hide. That's why I'll just mention this for benefit that most of you were here when we made this comment in the early part of the book of Acts, when Paul and Barnabas were first traveling, that this southern coast right here of modern-day Turkey, of Asia Minor, this was one of the most perilous places to sail because there were so many coves inside there where pirates would lay their ships, and they would just wait for the trade. All of the trade that would come from the coast here, from the eastern world, would make its way over to the western world, Ephesus being a major point at that time. It isn't today, of course, but at that time, Ephesus, then over to Athens. This would have been a natural highway from here to here to here. Then from Corinth, they would go through the isthmus, then go right up to Rome. So they were laying in wait. They were like what we would call highwaymen that were waiting to plunder these ships. And it was really rough going, and there was very little to save them, to protect them. And as we had noted, when they got down here to the shore here at Pamphylia, the hike from here up to Lystra, it's a pretty rough, rugged hike, zigzag back and forth. And there were all kinds of places where thieves could lay wait and be ambushed. And so the fact of the matter was, just as in the days of Christ, on the road to Jericho, you remember the Good Samaritan, that parable there were all kinds of places for bad people to lay in wait and to exploit, steal, rob, beat the major travelers. So that's just a brief little layout of what's going on here. So they're coming down this coast, and they're going to come to Berea here. And as they come down to this, let's see here. Here they'll make their way, let me back this up here a little bit here. From here, they will make their way to Berea, as we had noted Wednesday night, just as our class was finishing. And when they made it there, the character of the people were a little different. The difference was that the Thessalonians, they heard the word and they went, yeah, okay, all right. But the Bereans had another aspect to their dimension to their study. They weren't just going to take someone's word for it. They had the scriptures to reason with that. Now, there's something about that is important to note that we may not pick up on, is that not everyone had a copy of the Torah. Usually it was reserved there in the synagogue, so they would have to come back and study with the rabbis to learn more and more. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the sermon this morning here. But as they were there, and Paul had noted, or Luke, I should say, had noted that these were more noble-minded in verse 11. That's not that they were smarter or more righteous, but they had more of a lawyer mind. The fair mind, the objective mind is, but what's this? Have you ever had children? What a silly question is that? Well, let me follow that up. Have you ever had children that weren't the same? Have you ever had children that some of them were opposites of one another? Have you ever had children where, whether male or female, one of them would just take exactly what they heard at face value and accept it, and another child would say, why? Why? Why do I have to do this? Why do I have to do that? Some might think, wow, they're being rebellious, or they're being stubborn, or being troublesome. No, they just actually want to know, what's the reason behind this? Well, that may go okay for one or two, but after the 47th why, then we figure out what's going on. They're stalling something. They're trying to keep us away from something. Anyway, basically, that's what we're looking at here. And Luke will make this point. Verse 12, therefore many of them believed, not only a few of the Greeks, prominent women as well as men. We talked about that Wednesday night, how the women who were prominent in their positions, they would listen, they would hear. Now, the thing, I have a picture of it, but it almost is not even worth putting up there. The thing that was the most disappointing to me about Berea, as I had mentioned, that the land was gorgeous. The drive from Thessalonica around the sea to Berea, it was just like you were going through a garden. There were orchards everywhere of all imaginable fruits and vegetables. They were a bounty of all of this. But when you get to Berea itself, to find anything from the first century, they have a place up on the side of a hill in the middle of a neighborhood where they have a piece of stone about 18 inches by 12 inches. And on it is carved something that they said this was the step to the synagogue. They built a little arch over it, had a little shrine and a bunch of stuff like that. It was like, this is a waste of time. I don't need to see this. This has nothing to do with Paul, but they tried to get you to do this. And as someone had mentioned to me here the other night after Bible study, that in many of these, quote, holy places, if anything remotely happened in the general area that's recorded in the Bible, they'll build a shrine to it. A shrine or a church. And one of the frustrating things is if you'd like to go to the site of where this happened or that happened, oftentimes it's buried underneath a 6-story cathedral. And they'll take you down in a little hole in a cave and you show you this is where this happened, etc. And it's kind of, it's very self-defeating, I think. But in whatever it is, we're looking at things that were actually there when these things happened. And verse 13, the Jews from Thessalonica learned that the word of God was preached by Paul at Berea. They came there also and stirred up the crowds. Now, let's talk about this for a moment. We know what happened right here at this picture at Thessalonica. Paul and Silas slipped away. That should be the end of it. But now these men who have followed them to Berea and find out that Paul and Silas are preaching there, they're stirring up the crowd. First thing I am struck with is that they knew the conviction of Paul and Silas, that they would be going there. They knew that they weren't going to stop. Putting it another way, we got them. We dragged Jason out. We took care of them, put the thread out. Paul and Silas, they were gone through the night. We won't be hearing about these guys anymore. Well, if that was what they were thinking, they were wrong, because they're going on to the next town. And they knew it, and they followed them there. That tells you something about the substance and the integrity of Paul and Silas. John?
It always strikes me, don't these men have jobs? Don't they have something they should be doing at home? It's always gotten me that it's so interesting how when evil takes root in your mind, or these guys' case, they're not even thinking they're evil, they're thinking they're being righteous. That we can convince ourselves to do pretty much anything if we think we're right.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. These men have jobs? Yeah. They have jobs that are directly or indirectly connected to the Torah, to the synagogue. That's why they are being directly threatened. It's not that they're unemployed and don't have any care, but to the contrary, they are feeling a direct threat. And then it won't be just the Jews. The next stop that they make in Athens, and then later in Ephesus, these men are preaching against their own gods, which is their livelihood, in making the various idols to these various gods. So they're feeling the direct pressure of the fact that if these people follow Christianity, we're in trouble. We've got some problems here. And that likely is why they're chasing him from city to city, and they're, notice, stirring up the crowds. Now, in that expression, stirring up the crowds, let's back out of this for a moment, and just hypothetically, I don't like to do this very often, but this may help illustrate the point. if these men from Thessalonica did not go to Berea and left the Bereans to themselves, what could have happened? Now, we're not trying to play fast and loose with the Bible here. We're not doing that. But based upon what has been recorded so far, both positive and negative, what could we at least to some measure of correction, what could we say about the future of the church and the people at Berea if these events had not happened? And why? Anyway.
I don't know if I'm picking it up right, but I'm thinking maybe they would have actually been somewhat convinced and found some truth.
Why? That's right. I think you're right.
They got the word and they're studiers, it seems like. So.
Hey, there you go. They're studiers. Luke has already made the point that they were more fair-minded than those at Thessalonica. Now, this may be a broad brush that we're painting these people with, and it's a generic. It's not true of every single person. But as Luke says, the people in Thessalonica, they just accepted it. Well, obviously some of them didn't. But the people in Berea, they wouldn't accept it firsthand right away. They stopped and they studied and they weighed that thing through. So my contention would be that if these men from Thessalonica had just stayed home and minded their own business, the people in Berea, who were already more noble-minded in the fact that they were studious, they wanted to know, that if they had been left alone, everything would have been fine. But the men from Thessalonica, they stirred up. What does that suggest? They're stirring them up.
Making a mess and disorder.
Create contention and
Yeah,
contention, doubt, trying to
yeah,
rile them up.
right. You don't believe those guys, do you? We don't believe them. Sure enough. Oh, well, then maybe it's so now here these people, they're getting another mindset. Yeah, these guys read at our town just a little while ago, and they caused all kinds of trouble. Oh, really? Well, we haven't had any trouble. That's right. They hadn't until these Thessalonians had showed up. Warren?
Yeah, and the ones that were really stirring everything up, they were bringing in more of what they felt their interpretation of the Torah was, and how important that was, I feel. Because the Bereans are probably studying both scriptures and
Right.
the Torah, but then they felt the scriptures were more honest, correct, but then these guys coming in, the disruptors, of course, put the Torah up front, caused that discussion to become a disruption.
Right. The wrong kind of discussion. Let's put it that way. Yeah. Barry?
They're taking a logical, studious approach and pushing it to an emotional approach. And that's what happens in any mob scene.
Yeah.
People get riled up. I mean, you see it at football games, and
Yeah.
people get carried away.
Right.
A lot of them doing stuff they would never think about doing, but they're caught up in the moment of being in a mob. You know, we wouldn't kill anybody. I'd never kill anybody. Oh, except when I'm in a mob with other people and I can get away with it.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to push the Bereans towards an emotional response rather than a thinking response.
And Julie?
Well, yeah, throughout history, you see how you get people to do things you never thought they would do, is to threaten their power and threaten their money. Those two things. You tell somebody, oh, these people are gonna come in and you're gonna lose this source of income and they're gonna take this job and they're gonna do this, and, you know, you can get people to do anything.
That's
History
right.
shows that.
Been human nature for thousands of years. And this is a good case in point because as the story begins, we have a lot of admiration for the Bereans. That these people are fair-minded some translations, noble-minded other translations. They were objectively minded. So the first impression we get of the Bereans is that these people are thoughtful, deliberate people who really have control of their emotions, their thinking, their course of action, that they're going to be deliberate people. And then, just like that, these Thessalonians show up, get them all excited, and the next thing you know, the brethren are having to hide Paul and Silas. That's how out of control this got so quickly. And so what Julie said about human nature is absolutely correct. In every age and in every corner of the earth. It's just an unfortunate fact of life about human nature. So verse 14, immediately the brethren sent Paul away to go to the sea. But Silas and Timothy remained there. Now that's interesting. They split them up. Now, why would Paul and Silas and Timothy be split up? Well, it may be that we know Timothy already is a young man. He's a protege of Paul's. And Silas is a new traveler with Paul. And that when Paul is mentioned first, he is the prominent one in this group of people. And so the troublemakers are going to go after the lead man. And they know this, and they recognize Paul's the man who has the mark on his head. He's the one who's got the bullseye, the target on him. And so Silas and Timothy, not so much. They're able to send them away in such a way where they could keep them in the city, but then send Paul down to the sea. And the expression down to the sea is indicative of the fact that it was going to be a fast getaway. He could have stayed on the road and continued on. But no, there's too many chances of getting jumped, ambushed, taken on land, because word's going to spread. We got to get him on a ship and to get him out of here quickly. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to put him on a ship and send him as far south as they can. He's going to go to Athens. He can get lost in the city of Athens because they're all philosophers there. Now, I don't know if you've thought about this or not. I want you to kind of keep this in the back of your mind here for this coming week when we study Paul in the city of Athens. But at first thought, people might look at this and say, oh, what a shame that Paul finds himself all alone in the city of Athens. And he's just surrounded by all of these pagans and these pagan idols, etc. Well, two things come to my mind. First is, he sees this as an opportunity that he is going to be able to preach a sermon that he's never preached before. When we get to his sermon on Mars Hill, it'll be unlike anything that he's ever preached before and anything that we've ever heard so far in the Bible. So that's going to be a unique opportunity with a unique man in a unique circumstance to read what will be a timeless sermon. I don't know how many preachers have ever lived on this planet who has ever had their entire sermon printed on a bronze plaque and placed at the spot that they preached it. But that's what you'll find at Mars Hill. You can go online, look at it, look up Areopagite, Mars Hill, and you'll see a picture. They'll have that plaque. You can walk up and read the entire sermon, English and in Greek, and then walk up on the spot where he preached it. That's how profound that sermon was. Well, that's the first thing I'm struck with, is that he's put in this situation to give this kind of sermon. The second thing, in reaction to what we're reading here right now, is that there is safety in anonymity. He's on the road from Berea, and everybody knows about the trouble that happened in Berea and then previous in Thessalonica. So these brethren are thinking, we got to get him off the road, get him on the ship, get him down to Athens as soon as we can. Because he'll be safe there. He won't be safe out on the road. Because who could protect him? And say, well, vaya con Dios. Yeah, that's right. God will go with you. And he sure did, as we see there in that incident, as we'll see here in just a moment. But so Paul is separated for the first time from Silas and Timothy. I wonder, I don't know, the text doesn't say, I wonder how Timothy felt when Paul has been threatened and they want to kill him. And now Paul says, well, we're going to get him out of here. He's gone. I wonder if Timothy felt a little abandoned. He felt a little bit, Paul, where are you going? But we see in this next verse here that those who conducted Paul brought him to Athens, and receiving a command for Silas and Timothy to come to him with all speed, they departed. Paul is telling Silas and Timothy, don't worry, fellas, I'm not leaving you. I need you. You are a part of my ministry. I've got to have you. But right now, because of this situation, I have to get out of here. And it wouldn't be safe for Silas or Timothy to be seen with Paul. So Paul has got to get out and leave. But he says, I'll send for you. You'll know where I'm at. And I'll be there waiting for you in Athens. So Silas and Timothy may have mixed emotions. The emotion, first of all, that, okay, well, God will protect him and he'll be okay. He's not going to be lost. And then the second thought is, what are we going to do without him? He's our leader. We're going to try to do the best we can. And that leads me to the next thing. Jesus, in his ministry for 3 years, he has two things to do. Number one, inevitably be crucified. That's the Father's will. Crucified, then raised to walk the third day. But the other objective he has with it, the second, is to prepare these men to preach. Because when Jesus leaves, who's going to preach the gospel? So that's what he's doing. He's preparing these men, these disciples who now we have the examples that we're reading of now. So what's Paul doing? I'm going to say he's going to repeat the same thing. Paul knows his life is in jeopardy. He may find some powerful parallels with our Lord, not that he's the Son of God, but that he is a marked man. And so he needs men like Barnabas and Mark and Silas and Timothy and others. That's why he'll mention them at the end of these letters to Rome and Corinth. That these men need to take my place. You need to be strong. You need to be encouraged. You need to be prepared, because one day the mantle is going to fall to you and you're going to be in the driver's seat. Take it down. Okay, Rodney and then Barry.
Reading this, I had a question about Thessalonica. Was that prominent Roman and Greek people? So how did that word travel so fast that they had to get Paul out so quickly that other people were going to kill him? And thus Romans, most of the Roman leaders wouldn't want
The chaos.
Yeah, the chaos.
They don't want, yeah, that's right.
So
They don't.
I'm like, how, that's confusing me right now.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. Who would they be afraid of? The Roman citizen or the Jewish agitators? Judaizing teachers were the number one enemy of the church in the first century until AD 70, the destruction of Jerusalem. Oftentimes, Romans would become their friends, like Paul in Philippi. The Romans came to his rescue and got him out of the city. Jews wouldn't do that. They want him dead. They want everybody. Connect with them dead. So they're not fearing the Romans. They're fearing the Jews. And there's already a network of Jews throughout there, which is so extraordinary to think about how vast that network of the Jewish law had become, even in Europe. And so these Thessalonian Jewish teachers see it their duty to go out and warn everybody. These guys are troublemakers. You better get rid of them. We're trying our best. And the irony in this whole thing is that the Romans become the greatest allies to the early church. If the Roman government had not existed, now I'm not telling you to accept it right now because I'm giving you a huge piece to bite off now and chew. And it'll take a lot of chewing and thinking to digest this. But just kind of keep this in the back of your mind here for the next few days. If the Roman government did not exist at that time, and it was simply ruled by the various kingdoms, including the Jews, what chance would the church have? It'd be awful tough. But in reality, what at first would appear to be a great enemy and hindrance to the Lord's church, in fact, through the providence of God, became the very way that Christianity could open doors into Europe and keep moving further and further west. It was because of Rome. We look back and see the wisdom of God and how so many things came to be at one time, which all, as we call the perfect storm, whatever it is, the perfect storm came to us on Pentecost. And they took it and ran with it, and the Jews fought as best they could until finally the Romans ended it. Oh, the great horror of the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. The thing is, as we go back and study Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, as you study that, Jesus is saying, for those who know, they'll be gone. He's giving them warning so that they will not suffer under the hands of the Romans. And for the most part, scholars will all agree that most of the Christians, they got out of there. The horror of the destruction of Jerusalem touched those loyalist Jews who remained in the city, not the Christians. They got word enough and they got out. And then as they were separated, then God dropped the hammer on the temple, and that was it. And it never came back. So it's so extraordinary, and it's just it's a wonderfully wistful thinking about how God could take something that was so bad and use it for good. Give you a good example that we're all familiar with here in the Old Testament. In the book of Habakkuk, when Habakkuk was so upset at the Israeli people for their disobedience and their disrespect, and he wanted God to just destroy them all, and God said to Habakkuk, said, hush. Tell you what, Hab, go over here and sit down, and you just watch. I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'm raising up a people right now to take care of. Who's that? Well, the Chaldeans. And Habakkuk throws a fit. Please excuse me, because I see new faces in here all the time. And I don't know who's heard this before. Some of you I know have, but others haven't. So I'll just take this time to make this one comment in passing. Habakkuk stands alone in all Old Testament books. Stands alone because it is the only book in the Bible that was written from man to God. Every other book in the Bible was written from God to man. God did not prompt the book of Habakkuk. Habakkuk did. Habakkuk was angry. He was upset at the Jewish people. And so he basically vents to the Lord and says, when are you going to do something? And then God responds, said, I am. I'm all ready. He said, you won't believe what I'm about to do, but this is what I'm going to do. And when he did it, he just purged. And that's where we have that incident happening. That it wasn't by accident. God already was doing what he could to purge his people. And he used the enemies, what appeared to be the enemies, to actually be the hand of his execution, the hand of his judgment. All right, any question? Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a comment. When you said the providence of God, it reminds me of Joseph when he tells his brothers later,
Yeah.
you meant evil, you were trying to do evil, but this is what God used, and here we are now with this famine.
That's right. That's exactly right. Okay, all right, we keep on here looking at what we have read here. Now we get to Athens. So verse 16 of Acts 17, it says, now while Paul waited for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked within him when he saw that the city was given over to idols. We mentioned this Wednesday night in class, and I think I have in other places, that it is estimated that there were a little over 20,000 separate idols to gods in Athens at that time in the first century. And so there would be multiple idols to these gods. And so when you've got over 20,000 deities spread out through this town, that's why I had mentioned Wednesday night that if you've never been there, You can even see some pictures, but if you wanted to get the full impact, you go to Athens, rent a car and drive over to the Parthenon, park it right there, and then just go for about a 3-mile walk. And you will just be overwhelmed at all of the temples to all of the various idols and gods that they had there. If there was never a more polytheistic culture on earth at that time than the Athenians. That's why they had the altar to the unknown God, which of course Paul would preach about. So this was everywhere, and the thing that we need to keep in mind is that as Paul goes to the synagogue in every city, as we've noted already, that was his practice, would go and reason in the synagogue. He is going from one place out into another. What does that mean, Kenny? He comes into a city he's never been before, Berea, Thessalonica, Philippi. Goes into the synagogue that is comprised of people who are monotheistic. They believe in one God. They're the only people in the city, in the region, in the world. Maybe you've studied this in world history or world religions. The concept of the Egyptian people now hosting the Israelites and putting them into bondage, Egypt falling apart, and now Israel coming out of the land of Egypt, not as a family, now as a nation. When they came out and Moses led them out, they are the only monotheistic people on the earth. And they will continue to be. And so right up until the time of Paul in the first century, Paul will go into a synagogue, which is the center for monotheism. They may have arguments about Moses and law and etc., but he will be in this arena of monotheism for 2, 3, 4 Sabbaths, and then he goes out into the arena of polytheism, where gods are on every corner. What a shock that would be. Now, we're living in a day and age now where we all travel. We got folks here every week. We've got visitors from different parts of the state, different parts of the country, different parts of the world. But we all find the Lord's church. And so when we travel across the country or wherever, we go find a group of people who are worshiping the Lord. It's the same group of people. Now, they may dress different. They may talk different. They may have things a little bit unusual that we're not used to, but they still believe in one God. One God. So we go from congregation to congregation, from coast to coast, Pacific to the Atlantic. And we're always worshiping with people who believe in the one God. But now, pull yourself out of that and then go to a temple of philosophy, where they all entertain all kinds of ideas, thoughts, people, individuals like that. And that's just like, this is a different world. This is what Paul is doing. He goes into the synagogue and then he comes out and he realizes this is where the real battleground is. Yes, he was the chosen vessel to the Gentiles, as was told, but he's going to the Jews first, as he would say, and then also the Greek. That Jews first is only going to last for just a short while. That practice is going to end real soon. As a matter of fact, that practice will end at the book of Acts, and we'll talk about that when we get to the end of it. But he's going out into the real world, and he's fighting all of these people who believes in all of these different gods, and that's going to culminate right here in this sermon here on Mars Hill. Because look at the next verse, verse 17. He reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and with the Gentile worshipers, and in the marketplace daily with those who happened to be there. So he's reasoning with them. He is not saying, he's not giving the same old plain, same old basic bullet points of this, and this. He's reasoning with them. This is an exchange of ideas here, that in this exchange he's going to show them a more perfect way. And that's how he is going to be able to preach this sermon. Now, if you think about this for a moment, particularly from a preacher's standpoint, if a preacher, if I'm going to go to Athens and the Lord says, Kenny, you're going to go to Athens and you're going to preach to all of these pagan philosophers, all right. I thought, okay, I've got a plan. I get up there and I said, all right, fellas, I'm preaching Jesus of Nazareth. He's the guy in Israel that you heard about that they crucified. Now I'm here to tell you that he is the one. And all this other stuff is nonsense. How far am I going to get in that? I'm not going to get very far in that sermon. They're going to push me off the rock, which will be pretty easy when you've ever been on that rock. But what Paul does is he's going to come along and he's not going to identify himself as a monotheist. He is going to identify the God. Think about that for a minute. He's not identifying himself. He's going to identify the God, the unknown God. So he's saying that I'm not here to tell you what I believe. I'm not here to tell you about my God. I'm here to tell you about your God, the God that you call the unknown God. Now, how far would he be able to get with that? That kind of introduction, they go, really? I want to hear more about that. Yeah. We're not here to listen. I started to use here twice. Hear. We're not here to hear. H-E-A-R, hear. We're not here to listen to you about your God. We want to know truth. You remember, what was the thing that Luke used to describe the men on Mars Hill? That they had nothing to do but...
Here's something.
That's right. That's right. Daniel, hear something new. For someone to hear, speak something new. Yeah, we're here to learn. All right. So he looked at that, and so verse 17, he's going to reason with them. They're going to learn something. He's reasoning first in the synagogue with the Jews, Gentile worshipers, and then he goes into the marketplace. Now, this is where polytheists are going to be, and that's one, right? Okay, you got me rattled out last Wednesday, Bob. Okay, they're reasoning in the marketplace, and those people are there. They're the people that accept all these different gods. This is their home. This is what they've been brought up with. That's all that they know. Verse 18, then certain Epicurean and Stoic philosophers encountered them. All right, now here we're going to have two schools of thought. And I'm going to give you an assignment here in a minute. These encountered him. And some said, what does this babbler want to say? Now, babbler in some of your Bible footnotes will have this guy who's just talking. He's just talk. What is he saying? Others would say, he seems to be a proclaimer of foreign gods. Well, they're probably thinking, oh, good. Well, we have Greek gods. Maybe there's some Assyrian god, or maybe there's some kind of Jewish god, or maybe there's something else out there. Maybe we can hear about that. Because he preached them Jesus and the resurrection. Now, that tells us that to many of those people, this was still, this is a curiosity. Jesus and the resurrection, we don't know about this guy. But it's a Hebrew. Maybe we've heard about it. I'm not sure. So you have all these factions. And these are the people who are all going to be Paul's audience. And before the next buzzer hits, here's what I'd like you to do. This may just wipe out our class for Wednesday night. Nobody shows up. But for Wednesday night, do a little reading about Epicureans. Do a little reading about the Stoics. Do a little reading about the Athenian culture. Try to get a little background of what's going on here so that Wednesday night when we get here and Paul is setting up on the rock, we're going to put his sermon on the board. We're going to listen to what Paul says and see how he lays it out here. And if you are of the Epicurean philosophy or of the Stoic philosophy, you might see or hear this differently from one another. And we're going to talk about that. What would an Epicurean think about what he just said there? And what we'll do is we'll start the class Wednesday night with defining the Epicurean, the Stoic, the Athenian pagan idolater, and all of the various gods that went with the Greek mythology. And we all know about that whole system, or most of us know about that whole system, starting with Athena. She was the goddess of it all, sitting there upon the Parthenon, where they were at. And so they want to know what he said. So verse 19 will be our introduction. And they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, may we know what this new doctrine is of what you speak. Now, I'll give you one final thought here in our class. People just didn't go up there. The philosophers, that brotherhood of those men who were the think tank for Athens, they would invite certain people who they were recognized as people of either substance or repute or of some message and intellect that they're not familiar with, and they introduced and brought them up to share with everyone. So when Paul is going to be introduced and brought up to the top of that rock on the Areopagus, he's going to be welcomed as a peer. He's not going to be an outsider. He's not going to be a foreigner. He's going to be a peer that they might listen to. And what we'll find out is that's exactly what many of them did. They listened to him. So get ready for that. And Wednesday night, Lord willing, we'll be prepared to listen to a sermon.
How are you doing? Carl Wagner. Yes. Nice to meet you.
I'm using my other hand.
Tennis elbow.
Tennis elbow. Please kiss the ring. Thank you. I know I shake
Yeah, we're from Napa. From Napa, we're making our way to Texas. One month, big motor coach, we're Napa, we're driving to San Diego. Malibu, wait, Malibu, San Diego, Tucson, and El Paso. Yeah. Journey on the road. Just making our way down there. I told Dad, hey, we'll be there by Thanksgiving. Slowly but surely, we'll make our way there. Go see Dad for Thanksgiving. Burning the mines. Yeah, condo on wheels.
There's storage, and then there's running. Yeah, totally.
No, it's true. Yeah, we got this week up here. Started doing this. And so we said, hey, we want to see the country and drive the country. And so we said, let's do it. So we did it in 2019. And which we had remote jobs, so we could actually interrupt Massachusetts, South Carolina, Florida, 38 states, 80,000 miles in 5 years. Yeah, motivated to your point, well, yeah, we're getting some miles on this.